Hey guys, Randy Potato here. Today I'm going to teach you how to plan a path in Darkest Dungeon 2. First we'll teach you how to evaluate nodes, or locations, and then plot accordingly based on your run's progression. Let's start with the first encounter node in this game, Assistance Encounter. Here you will be presented with a myriad of options, with the most common being torch boosting and food loot, and potentially exchanging relics and or torch for other miscellaneous loot. Firstly, all encounter nodes allow you a chance to either boost or harm your current affinity, which is the strongest and most consistent way to build character relationships. This node's value is heavily impacted by whether you are doing a normal or infernal torch run, and at what region you're in. On infernal runs, this is almost entirely a dead node. I will never consider this node on an infernal run. The most common outcome is exchanging relics for some weak to moderate loot. Food is an important bonus, but is available for purchase at every inn, which makes nodes where you can more consistently gain loot more impactful. If you're playing with normal light, especially in the first region, I will almost always path through at least one of these for the light, because fighting a zero light cultist battle in the first region often means death. If you have a super strong team with OP paths and aren't scared of a deacon or cardinal early, then you can avoid the assistance, or if you have some other form of light manipulation. Once past the first biome, though, you want to be strong enough to take those zero light cultists, and you should proceed to ignore these nodes unless you're in a desperate spot. Next we have resistance encounters, this game's base combat, and what should be your bread and butter. Another encounter, which means you get a chance to boost relationships. The potential rewards for completing this fight are numerous. You have a high chance at a mastery point, can get up to 16 relics, and between 8 and 32 baubles, which is even higher than the lair boss. Also a chance of rolling items and trinkets. These fights are often as easy as road combats and rarely as difficult as any other location fight, making it low to medium risk and high reward. Especially in Region 1, you want to prioritize resistant encounters, only detouring for a handful of rarer nodes. Cultist encounters are on average harder resistant encounters, with the enemies being granted more dodge, more crit, and more stress. It's dependent on your team comp how well you will fare, especially early on. These fights will grant you the same amount of relics, but usually much lower bauble rewards, and in exchange you get a Dark Impulse, required for activating cultist trinkets, and a chance of getting a cultist trinket to pair it with, along with a mastery chance. I always like to take one in the first biome to guarantee a Dark Impulse, but generally prioritize resistant encounters if made to choose between the two. Creature Den encounters are the final and most challenging and rewarding of all the encounters. In a Creature Den encounter, you face 2 waves of unique monsters, among them spiders, dogs, and worms. These enemies have high dodge, block, and dot damage, and with 2 waves with no rest in between are the most likely node to kill you outside of bosses. Even given this, I will almost always path towards this node unless I'm already near death team-wide. You get a unique item, which guarantees you a mastery or 2, and also grants a unique in bonus, from lower prices to disease clear to AoE stress heal. On top of this, you also have a chance to roll on an additional mastery, relics, and items. This bonus almost always outweighs the risks, and I'd probably consider it a win to get this node even if it meant losing a hero. Academic studies are not technically encounters, but still have the encounter mechanic, which allows you to build or destroy relationships. On average, it feels like relationship gain and loss will be more split on these nodes, and those options are weighted heavily by your hero quirks, so be a bit more cautious here. These locations are very high risk, high reward nodes that have a chance of giving you unique rare items and trinkets, usually at the cost of stress and quirks. While these gifts can be game changing, especially early, I usually skip them in favor of guaranteed rewards from fights. However, by default I select them over any non-fight node except Oasis, or one where I have an exceptional need, like Hospital, and especially in later regions where I have my mastery and relic bauble loot handled and am hunting for specific run-defining items. Overall, a very situational location. Oasis is the last location where you have a chance to gain or lose relationship, and on average, you will gain far more than you lose in this location. Using this location can give a small light boost and a -5 stress heal on the selected character, but the real benefit here is a chance to get Mineral Spring Water, a combat item which gives a small heal and -3 stress, and you get at least 3. I make it a point to try to visit an Oasis every region unless the overall path is so bad that it ends up a net negative. Now to the non-encounter locations. First we have Hero Shrines. The value of this node depends on your meta progression. If you still have skills left to unlock, I would always take the shrine, unless doing so would somehow prevent you from winning your current run, such as missing a Region 4 lair when you still need a trophy. Otherwise, I find hero shrines almost entirely useless, and will always skip unless necessary to proceed towards better nodes and paths. A guaranteed mastery is nice, at least early, normally useless in Region 4, but getting the chance to loot items and currency with nearly every other location is just better. Hospitals are a situational location. Their primary benefit is to remove diseases and negative quirks, as well as lock in positive ones, which is very expensive, as well as a chance to heal HP and purchase some basic combat and in items. If you have a debilitating disease and or quirk, or simply have a surplus of relics and have some game-changing positive quirks to lock in, then this is a fine stop. A side bonus is that the hospital will always have laudanum if you're struggling with stress, along with a chance to get other simple combat items that interact with some of the new trinkets. But primarily this is an emergency stop if you believe your diseases and quirks will have some serious repercussions if left unattended for the rest of the run. Hoarders are your shops. They have a much wider variety of items than the Inn Provisioner does, as well as being the only stop for certain rare trinkets with the new region-based trinket system implemented in the latest update. Generally, trinkets are the only thing that make this a good stop over a better node, such as Resistant Encounter, so I avoid these until I have 70 plus baubles, or equivalent with trinket cost reduction effects. Of course, if you're stuck in a tough spot, a timely combat item or two can fix it. Low priority in early biomes, but in later regions, I'm generally prioritizing these locations above all, depending on my current trinket situation. Academic caches provide you with a healthy variety of loot. You can definitely get some clutch pulls from these nodes, especially early, but they fall off drastically in late game, don't provide relics or baubles or mastery, and are far more random than shops. I generally avoid even in Region 2, unless I need to avoid a fight to heal or to get a better node. Probably not even better than an assisted encounter, because you lose the encounter mechanic. Watchtower is full scouter region for you. This is again a quite situational node that sees more use late game. One mistake I see players make is always routing to an early watchtower, assuming this early benefit always pays off. But a dead node in a region where you'll only get to see 12 or so is absolutely terrible. I will almost never consider a watchtower in Region 2. I save it exclusively for later regions where I'm specifically hunting for a hospital, hoarder, or some other specialty node. The one exception I'll make is if you have a choice between another near equally useless node, such as an early hospital hoarder or assistant encounter, and the early watchtower can salvage the rest of your biome. So just remember, this is not an automatic route early on. You need to evaluate the biome as a whole and have a specific plan made for a fully scouted region if you want to use a watchtower, not just turn here on a whim. Finally, we have lairs. This node should be the centerpiece of our pathing decisions. This location is always scouted, so you'll always be able to plan around whether or not you will attempt the boss. Obviously, this node has the highest average upside, getting you 28 relics and baubles, guaranteed rare trinkets, 2 mastery, and a trophy necessary to winning the run. A nice trophy tip is you can never get the same trophy twice, so if you attempt a single region twice in a run, you will be guaranteed to see both. So the earlier you fight a boss, the better, as long as you feel confident in the fight. Lairs also remain somewhat useful even without the boss, granting you 8 relics and baubles and a combat item for each of the 2 sentry fights. Obviously weaker than any other combat node, but beats the other dead nodes. Now to pathing. Let's first discuss some priorities for each region. You have 3 full regions before you have to face the mountain with a trophy in tow. In Region 2, the first full region after the valley, your priority should be to acquire as many mastery, relics, and baubles as possible. Top priority for me is getting to the various bauble thresholds, 70 and 100 without modifiers, with relics second and mastery last. This means prioritizing resistant encounters as discussed earlier. I also like forcing a cultist encounter here, either with a node or if I'm not playing Infernal by letting my torch fade. The new cultist trinkets are very high reward, especially early. Creature dens and oasis are almost always auto paths for me. As discussed earlier, lairs are very nice early to guarantee a trophy, so if you have a strong early team, this is obviously a good path, and the sentry loot isn't bad either. Once you enter Region 3 and 4, you need to start prioritizing different things. You should always find a way to swing through a hoarder, provided you have the requisite baubles to acquire a rare trinket. Oasis and den remain almost mandatory in Region 3, but in 4, I like skipping creatures to avoid diseases, assuming I feel strong enough for the mountain already. Hospitals are still situational late. You really need strong quirks on either end to make it a viable path. Obviously, your decisions late heavily weigh on whether you have a trophy you're happy to carry to the boss, although lair trinket loot is still very strong. If you're weak on trinkets and baubles, studies can be a nice path, but are very high risk and very RNG. This is more of a last resort move. Now let's do some example paths to drive the lesson home. This is a fresh Region 2 map. We have an above average team strength-wise, looking to maximize our early loot. Our region goal is a relevant rare trinket, which makes accomplishing this goal among our top priorities. Thankfully, the goal is simply to avoid the watchtower, which we are liable to do anyway. We have 3 paths ahead. We could go straight into 2 unknowns. Let's take a look at the full map to see what locations are already scouted to figure out what these nodes could potentially be. Watchtower and academic caches are out, since they're both already scouted because of region conditions. Both hero shrines are scouted, so they're out. We do have a scouted academic study, hoarder, and cultist, but you can have multiple of these, so it's still possible, albeit rare. Still, given what's left, we have a fairly decent shot at getting an Oasis or a Den, both highly valuable nodes. If we go middle, we can get a study into an unknown, giving us a chance at an early rare item. And on the right-hand path, we get an early cache, which has potential high value, given we have basically no items yet, into a resistance encounter, which as discussed earlier is arguably the most valuable early node. Hard left path leaves us the most upside, but the stronger chance of dead nodes means the right-hand path is on average a stronger choice. Next, we face a mandatory lair, which means it is not involved in our pathing decisions for this region. After this, we face a choice of unknowns versus a hero shrine into a cache. Hero and cache are both extremely weak, so we either go right or middle, depending on whether you want to do more road fights. Road fights generally reward you with 4 relics, but can potentially give you mastery, baubles, and items, so it's worth it to explore if we're still healthy after the lair. Next is a choice between a cache, unknown, and assistance, which leads to a hoarder. This depends on our current bauble count. Given we have done at least 1 resistance and a lair, if we completed the lair, we could be near the 60 to 70 bauble threshold. If we are at 70, I absolutely eat the assistant encounter and see a hoarder. Any less, and I stay straight and face the unknown. If we take this path, our decision making is over, giving us an unknown into a shrine into another unknown. If we take the hoarder, we can path to an Act 1 cultist to an unknown to finish off the first full region. Here we are in Region 4, with a trophy we're happy with, full mastery, max relationships, a ton of relics and baubles, and a disease we'd like to remove, and some positive quirks to lock in. Obviously, the hospital is our top priority, with a hoarder secondary. Unfortunately, no hospital is scouted on our map, so we'll need to rely on unknown nodes. The maximum unknown path is on this left side route, but this sends us through 2 assisted encounters and a watchtower. Pretty weak overall. A hard right path doesn't give us enough unknowns, and mostly sends us through fights which are not as useful for us now. How about an alternative middle path? We obviously take this first unknown node. The lair can still give us some useful rare trinkets, but another question mark is superior here since we have everything else sorted. Unfortunately, we are now forced into 2 mandatory assistance encounters. After that, we path hard right and hit the Oasis and 1 less overall unknown instead of the useless watchtower. This path forces us into a creature den, which is scary disease-wise, but the Oasis likely makes up for it. After this, our decision-making is done. We hit the mandatory unknown into hoarder and prepare for the mountain. Thank you for watching. Follow and subscribe for more guides. I release new ones every Friday.